Hello, check.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of all of us here at the university, a very warm welcome to Shri Naseeruddin Shah ji. I'm not going to introduce him to you. I'll only say one thing. We began talking about the possibility of his visit since last August when he was here for a play, Einstein, that he did. It's a mono act, you know. And one thing I remember was his the warmth with which he responded. And I should tell you a blunder I committed, okay? Which is, I spoke to him about the film course and said, would you please visit us and interact with the film students, little realizing the fact that I had just watched his play Einstein, and he shot back, don't you want me to interact with your theater students? So, you know, that was a faux pas, they say, no, that I committed. So here he is. He's been extremely generous with his time, and I would say the raison d'etre throughout. We managed to get a window, and we froze it immediately, which is today and tomorrow. And he's been the only one thing that drove us both, and especially Nazir Saab, is that he was looking forward to interacting with all of you, the students. So, regarding the format of this afternoon session, to maximize time and not have questions going all over, we have taken a few questions from the film course students last class. You ask them, they will tell you we spent 2.5 hours preparing for this session. And Mayura also did the same with the theater students. Of course, the stragglers kept sending in questions till last night too. I got a couple of questions at 12 last night. But some are good questions, incisive questions. So what I will do, Shri Nazir will talk to you all for 10-15 minutes, and then I will read out the questions, and the student concerned can clarify. And we'll have to keep in mind the fact that after this session with you all, we drive to Sompura. He has a long day today, and then he has an interaction with the undergrad students. So we will definitely conclude this session aim to conclude it by 4:15, because he has a long drive and a long interaction there almost until 9:15. So here we go. I hand over the...
Thank you all very much. And thank you, Professor Prasad, for sparing me the introduction. As I quote a line of Einstein where he says, if I believed all the things they say about me, I would not be sane. And since I know I am sane, I do not believe them. But the reason I was so keen to interact with you, and the reason I always am to mingle with students, is it makes me feel a lot younger. I don't feel very much older than when I was 20, tell you the truth. And sometimes when my body creaks and groans, I wonder why that's happening to a young guy like me. But it's wonderful to see so many people interested in theatre and film who are here. I hope none of you are here because of Dirty Picture. I'm afraid there's a lot of you. Yeah, okay. So to preempt any questions about Dirty Picture, because it doesn't deserve too much discussion, is I greatly enjoyed doing that part, full stop. No more about Dirty Picture. Okay, so on a somewhat more or less frivolous note, it was important for me to meet both the film and theatre students, because it's very important for all of you to understand the very close connection between theatre and film in our country. They're joined at the hip, literally. Unlike in other countries where theatre existed and then film came into being quite independent of theatre. It evolved in its own way, it found a form of its own, and became a completely separate art form, almost as different from theatre as still photography, as it was from still photography. In India, that did not happen. Let us just try and go back on the origins. Of course, I'm sure many of you are aware that India has perhaps one of the oldest theatrical traditions in the world, as old as in countries like China and Greece, and perhaps elsewhere, which places we don't know about. There are theatres in temples in Kerala. That's the same in Japan. It's the same in Greece. Which is why the element of the ritual continues to cling on to theatre. We still light lamps, we still pray to Ganpati before starting a performance and so on. A lot of actors also bow to the stage, but they only do it when someone is watching. Yeah. Now, let's not talk of the origins of theatre, but how it developed. Apart from the ancient Sanskrit texts, there were the Farsi epics also, which were recited by people called dastan goes. Dastan means epic and go means person who tells the story. And these were epics of fictional mythical characters, in all of which the villains were named after Zoroastrian gods. I think these stories were an allegory on the Islamic conquest of Persia. And they are very beautifully written, these stories. The poetry in those texts matches anything that Shakespeare ever wrote. They're extremely evocative. There can be a whole page-long description of a prince mounting a horse, or of a princess entering a hallway, and so on. And every now and then, the story just stops, and there's a beautiful song, or a beautiful poem that's recited for absolutely no reason at all. It has no connection to the story. Sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? Okay, then what happened? See, and the Dastan goes were the entertainers of the common man. The Nawabs and the Rajas had their classical musicians and their dancers and courtesans and so on who would entertain them. They patronized poets and painters and so on. Perhaps the first attempt at staging something Muslim, so to say, was done by Wajid Ali Shah around 1857. And he devised this whole act of Krishna, where he would play the gopi and so on. He was, in fact, a much misunderstood man. The fact that he was a debauch and so on was a complete fallacy spread by the British to justify their takeover. The fact is, he was a great patron of the arts. The art of Kathak was devised in his time. Many musicians, composers, poets, etc. were patronized. He wrote several books. Several books. Having written only one myself in 65 years, I know what that means. Several books. Yeah, try writing an article of 1,000 words. So, what happened then was that the Dastan Go then transformed into the Natak Tolis, which enacted these stories of Laila, Majnu and Rustam, Sohrab and so on. And again, they clung to the same form of extremely beautiful verse, melodramatic situations, every emotion underlined thrice in red, and a break where there would be a musical interlude. And this became par for the course in the Nautanki till today. when cinema began in India, first we made the silent movies. Now, it's also very interesting to note that in the West, the very first film ever shot was that of a train pulling into a station. No one has kept a record of what was the first piece of film ever shot in India, but there are even bets that it would have been something mythological, or something magical, or something terribly heroic, using camera tricks like stop motion, having a character disappear, or having a guy without a head walk in, or something like that. And if you look closely, our films have kept to that formula, because when they turned into talkies in the 30s, 1930s, before that, in the silent era, there were European ladies who were stars. There were Parsi gentlemen who were stars. There were European or Maharashtrians, because the Maharashtrians also, the Saraswats particularly, are fair. They have light eyes, sometimes brownish hair, and so on. They can pass off as European. So all those movies were for F-A-U-X, for European. You look at apart from the mythologicals, any social drama or any story set in a city, you'd always have the hero with a felt hat and a Ronald Colman mustache, smoking a cigarette, stylishly wearing an overcoat. And the ladies were also similarly dressed. Now, when the talkies came in, they needed actors who could speak. So the Parsi actors, the Bilimoria brothers, and so on, they all faded into oblivion, as did the European ladies who were big stars at that time. I cannot recall any names, but there are many. Similarly, the Maharashtrian. And where did they go looking for this talent? But in the theatre. Actors who had good voices and actors who could speak dialogue and who could speak Urdu. As a close result, those first movies that were made as talkies were looked like nothing but plays filmed. Very dated kind of staging. People have that white pancake makeup, the most artificial looking mustaches, and the acting style is, all that kind of thing. They were practically records of the plays when they weren't mythologicals. So not only the actors, the writers, the musicians, the set designers, the choreographers, the dancers, the singers, everybody from the theatre moved into the movies, bringing with them their sensibilities. And that's why Hindi movies got stuck with that form of telling a story in the broadest possible strokes, underlining every emotion, and music always being an integral part of it. And I mean, it really is beginning to pall, I have to say. I'm not a great fan of Hindi movies, even though I work in them. But unless the music is vastly entertaining, really worth listening to, or unless it is an integral part of the story, I find it very tiresome when I'm watching a movie and a song comes on for absolutely no reason at all. And the sad part is we haven't outgrown it, and we don't seem to want to outgrow it. Everyone is comfortable within that safety zone. The audience too, and the audience is equally to blame. Not solely to blame. As the filmmakers claim, we give the audience what they want. No, the audience is dying to see good stuff. But they'll also accept a lot of crap if you give it to them because they've got no choice. These films do not reflect the tastes of the audience. They reflect the tastes of the guys who make them. And that is why a lot of them are so terribly crass. And over the years, it's become like an addiction watching these movies. And all of you know that. You'd go to see a movie even knowing it's going to be rubbish. Yeah. But you go and see it. And it's not only to eat the popcorn, it's to actually to see that movie. And you come out cursing it. But you might even go and see it again if a whole lot of friends are going. And seeing it the second time, you like it a little more because you know what to expect. And having liked it a little more, you might just see it a third time. And that's what makes a hit. It's this addiction that has been created over the years. But the trouble is also that our audiences are too easily pleased. Mr. Ray wrote this in his book 50 years ago. Our Films, Their Films. It's a book you must read. Where he said, I wish the audiences were more demanding. Until they don't become more demanding, we will continue to churn out this stuff, which is basically just an excuse for multiplying your investment. I know because I've been in this industry for 40 years and I've seen it close up. Making a good film is the last thing on anybody's mind. That's a fact. The fact, unfortunately, also is that today, making a film has become comparatively easy when juxtaposed with the fact of releasing the damn thing. Because if you try to make a film which treads unfamiliar territory, the audience feels uneasy if they don't get their fix within 3 minutes, if there isn't a song, or if somebody doesn't burst into tears, or somebody doesn't get shot in the head, or something like that. The audience begins to feel uneasy. They feel they're on unfamiliar ground. So you find films which are attempting to be different. A recent film like Airlift, for example, which is attempting to be different, which is made by a friend of mine. He was compelled by his producer to put in those two stupid songs, which the film could well have done without. And it would not have impacted the success or failure of that film. But he was compelled to put them in and he had no choice. And now everybody believes the film ran because of the songs. This is a syllogism, you know, which is really strange. So if we are to, in this 21st century and after 100 years of making the same movie, if we are going to do something different, then it has to start with all of you. You've got to become more demanding as audiences, first of all. You've got to stop sitting back and munching popcorn while watching movies now. You've got to study the movie. And even a movie which you don't like deserves to be studied, because as the saying goes, I never met a man so dumb I couldn't learn something from him. You know, learn why you think it's bad, or if you really like a movie, try to understand why you think it's a great movie. It's not enough just to say, "Haan, badi achhi thi ya badi bekar thi," because it's very hard work. And those of you who aspire to become filmmakers should be aware of it. It is very heartbreaking and very, very hard work. Even to make a very bad movie, you've got to work very hard. And it's humiliating to attempt to peddle a script which is dear to your heart. You go to some overfed producer and try to convince him that this is a film worth making, and he laughs in your face and throws you out of his office. And then, if you do finally manage to make it, then to go to an even worse creature called the distributor and persuade him to help you release it. So it's a path that is strewn with thorns, but if that's what your calling in life is, that's what your calling in life is. And you've got to follow it and be prepared that it's not going to be a joyride. It's going to be really tough, because you've got 100 years of tradition working against you. So it's time to at least make a beginning. And people like me take comfort in the fact that, I dreamt that I would be part of a great movement that would alter the face of Indian cinema. Like every other contemporary actor I knew who I was close to. That hasn't happened. And it hasn't happened, but I don't feel a sense of despair about it, because I feel we were part of a transitory period, which is equally important. And you people too may be part of a transition. But if you're part of that transition, make that transition count. I also believe, in fact, what reminds me, since I'm going to Pune tomorrow to attend a meeting of the Film Conservation Society, which is run by a student of mine, where they are trying to restore and preserve old films, a lot of which are in very bad condition. The Film Archives of Pune is supposed to look after them, but of course, like any government department, they neglect what they're supposed to do. And there's this young man who's been working at it and restoring a lot of old movies. And what I intend to say there is what I will also say to all of you, is that I'm not knocking entertainment cinema. Entertainment, sure, is important. But it's not the only thing cinema can achieve. There's a lot more that can be done with it. And also remember, no matter how deep or profound or earth-shaking you believe your statement to be, nobody's going to listen to it if you don't engage them. So your job is to entertain while you educate, if one can put it like that. And your responsibility to serious cinema. I do not believe in cinema as a medium of change. I do not believe in cinema necessarily even as education. Documentaries perhaps, but not feature films. So, am I saying that serious cinema should not exist? No. Serious cinema has a function. To my mind, that function is to act as a record of its times. To act as a record of its times. Which is why we have the responsibility to be part of, to make, to help, to watch movies which try to represent life as it is in our times, on this planet, in this country. It's a great responsibility for posterity. Because if 200 years later someone wanted to find out what the India of 2015 was like, and they found a film called Welcome Back, right? That would be a tragedy. Okay. So we can take the questions now. Is this one working? Is this working? No? Hello, hello. Yeah?
The first question from the theatre course. Mic is okay now? Okay. Veeraj has asked a question. When the actor has to remember the lines and speak and enter into the character, sometimes it happens that in the flow, the actor wants to tell his or her own feelings and dialogues spontaneously. How does one manage such a state of mind while performing any such intense act? Veeraj is here? Yes.
There is no such thing as spontaneity in acting, while actually acting. Acting has to have the appearance of spontaneity. And that appearance only comes after a great deal of effort. When you watch a great dancer perform, or you watch a great singer perform, or a great musician perform, it feels effortless. It doesn't seem as if the person is making any effort at all. But the fact is, there's a tremendous amount of effort being put in at that moment and for many, many, many days before that. Actors who claim
that they are spontaneous actors are basically lazy actors who are who have a very fair chance of ruining the entire work. And they take refuge behind this nonsense of spontaneity. If every actor decides to be spontaneous in the scene, what's going to happen to the scene? Right? So your acting must have the appearance of spontaneity, which is another subject which we can talk about all night, how one acquires that and what all the things one is supposed to do. But the fact is, it's a great deal of hard labor that's required to achieve that state. If you have worked so much on your dialogue that you can be woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning out of a deep sleep and given your cue, you can respond immediately. You should know your dialogue that well that you can stand on your head and speak your lines. Then maybe from show to show, you can introduce little bits of spontaneous actions, perhaps. It is dangerous to start introducing dialogue which is not in the script, because all of us are not as good at dialogue as the writer is. Secondly, the writer has not thought it up in 1 second. He has thought about it and explored and discarded various possibilities, and then he has hit upon the right words to express this feeling. Also remember that in a great play, not a single word is superfluous, unnecessary. Even if a character just says, ah, it is not just something that the playwright has, is actor ko bahut ko dialogue nahi diya, isko ah bulwa do yaar. It's not because of that. It's because that ah conveys something. Now, you may say, what about Shakespeare? Huh? He liked to use many words. A lot of it is poetry. You have to treat it as poetry. But if you study it carefully, you will find that even in those unending speeches, there is nothing that is said which is superfluous. They are all things which talk about a situation or a character or a dilemma or a problem or something like that, right? So spontaneity in acting is a very dangerous thing. Okay, everybody hear me? Yes? Okay.
The next question is from Anna. Where is Anna? Yes. How has theatre as an art form changed for you as an actor over the years from when you began acting? She has 3 questions. Shall I complete them? Or?
Yeah.
The second is, being an actor in both Indian cinema as well as international cinema.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Got that.
Have you struggled at any point with being able to identify with a character you have had to play? And hence, is it absolutely necessary to be able to step into the character's shoes to act that particular part out?
Okay, right. Everybody heard that question. The second question was, what are the differences between acting in cinema and in the theatre? Okay, I'll answer these 2 questions first because they're easily answered. There's absolutely no difference between acting in the theatre and acting in cinema. This is what I believe deeply, and I'm not joking. This is a fallacy that in the theatre you have to enlarge your performance and you must be heard in the back row. Sure, you must be heard in the back row. But if you're only concentrating on the guy in the back row, what about the guy in the first row? He's going to go deaf. You have to find a way to communicate the same performance to every viewer there. So it's a strange paradox that the actor battles with, that you are completely aware and completely oblivious of the audience at the same time. The plays I do, I don't perform for the audience. I'm grateful for their presence, and I'm happy that they're sharing it here. But I don't do it for them. The plays I do are for reasons of my own. I don't calculate whether this play is going to be a success or not, or any of that sort of thing. And truth is basically what it's all about in acting. There's no such thing as overacting and underacting. That's all nonsense. There is truth and falseness, that's all. Otherwise, Kathakali is the worst kind of overacting, right? Or Kabuki. It's not. Because the context of its truth is something else. The context, the codification of classical acting is something else, and the codification of modern acting is something else. And people say, you can't be seen in the back rows. That's also nonsense. I have sat in the last rows when I was a student and watched plays, and I can see everything. If you're focusing, the human eye has a stronger ability to focus than any lens or any light. You can see the actor's eyes, you can see the tears in them, you can see the trembling of his lip, whatever is happening to the person. If he's trying to show it to you, you're going to say, ye to acting kar raha hai. The best acting is when you don't notice it. And that holds true in the theater and in movies. There is no difference at all. This business about identifying with the character, you have to empathize with the character. You can't always identify. I can't identify with Einstein. I can empathize with him. I can't understand Gandhi. I can't understand Ghalib. If I try understanding these people, it will take me 10 lifetimes, and I still won't manage. What I have to do is empathize with them. What I have to do is gain as much information as I need to play this part. I need to do my homework. Sure, I need to know. I can't be ignorant about these people when I play them. But I don't have to study all of Ghalib's work in order to play him, because that's not necessary. Similarly, any other part. So actors are always concerned with how is the character feeling, right? You should be more concerned with what the character is doing, not what he's feeling. The feeling is the result of what he's doing. Always try to search for what is the character doing. No character ever appears for no reason at all. The reason may not be spelled out, whether in a play or in a movie or in anything, except in a very bad play where a character comes on to have a stroll, right? So try to search for that. And I have never found my personality gotten confused with a character I've played. I think that's a myth spread by American actors who have made method acting, who've given method acting a bad name, where method acting is understood as nothing else but indulgence by an actor. You know what I'm talking about? Method, I'm getting involved in my role. They'll say, instead of working on their lines, they'll try to get involved in the role. They try to understand what the character is feeling and reproduce that, instead of doing the basic work which they forget to do. You find actors improvising before they've learnt their lines. Never done. So, I think unless you need to see a psychoanalyst, your own personality should not intrude, and I never take my work home with me. I never have. No character has stayed with me, because all those characters are there inside me anyway. Any part we play as actors. Remember, those of you who want to become actors, any part you play is within you. Try to discover that potential within you of being anything, from a saint to a sinner, the whole range in between. And try to face all those qualities. It isn't pleasant, but it'll help. All of us have every potential within us. A lot of the time, particularly in commercial Hindi cinema, you hear actors saying, but this character would never do this. Anybody could do anything, given the right stimulus. We've been reading in the papers, right, about parents killing their own children, children killing their parents, so on. Anybody can do anything, given the right given the suitable stimulus. So, as actors, you have to try and face every aspect of yourself, because if truth matters to you, then just showing off as an actor will not be sufficient for you in your lives. And the first question, how has theatre as an art form changed for you? Okay, Like all of you, I suppose, I was introduced to theatre in school. The kind of plays where you have a painted backdrop of a drawing room with a fireplace. Yeah? Why there's a fireplace in India, heaven only knows. And you have sofas facing the audience. Everybody's wearing mummy and daddy's coats and trousers. Painted faces, penciled moustaches. Everybody stands facing the audience and elocutes as well as they can. Right? That's the kind of theatre I was introduced to as a child. Luckily for me, there was this troupe called Shakespeareana, run by Mr. Geoffrey Kendall, who also toured our school. And I watched their plays also from a very early age, which affected me greatly, but that's another subject. Then I finished school, college and so on. I came to Delhi, and like everybody else, I imagined that the theatre I want to do must be this magnificent stuff that I see photographs of Laurence Olivier in, you know, with monumental sets and magnificent costumes and swords and this and that and crowns, and I want to play Hamlet and I want to play Othello and I want to do this and I want to do that. The grandeur of theatre. And the teacher in the drama school then was Mr. Al-Qazi, Mr. Ibrahim Al-Qazi, who himself was trained in England and who produced these very spectacular productions, which I was completely floored by, because I had never seen anything like that in my life. Then I went abroad and I saw the plays on Broadway and the West End and so on, which dazzled me even more for a while. And then I got thoroughly fed up of them, because if you've seen one, you've seen them all. And I happened upon a book called Towards a Poor Theatre. I hope you have that book in your library. If you don't, please get it. It's written by Jerzy Grotowski, where, incidentally, after I'd just come back from America the first time and seen Miss Saigon and Les Miserables and all these things. And what he wrote, and this was written somewhere in the 50s, that all of European theatre is traveling in the wrong direction. All Western theatre is moving in the wrong direction. All of them are trying to create the same illusion that cinema creates. And if any of you have been abroad and seen these plays, you'll know what I mean. They are part magic show, part rock concert, and part stand-up comedy. They are not theatre. I've seen a play with a car chase on stage. I've seen a play with the Titanic appearing on stage. I've seen a play with the helicopter landing on stage. You know? And not for a second did I really believe that this is a helicopter, an actual helicopter, despite the best sound effects and every visual trickery and everything. So Grotowski said that why then is theatre trying to create the same illusion? It can never do it. 1 second and you're transported from the inside of a bedroom to a rainy forest. Another second you're transported to a fireside. Another second you're transported to the palace. Theatre can never do this. So why is it trying? Does that mean theatre has lost its function? That what theatre did, cinema is doing better now? Is that so? Which means theatre should lie down and die? Obviously the answer is no. So what is the identity of theatre? If it is not to depend on this magic show, conjuring tricks all the time, what is the identity of theatre? It's the living human being up there. The person sending out vibrations in your direction. The person sending out energy waves in your direction. That's what's unique about theatre. Something cinema can never capture. So he concentrated on doing theatre of that kind, where he dispensed with everything that he considered unnecessary. Starting with sets, later with costumes, having just basic blacks for everybody, later on with props, later on even with dialogue, where he had actors trying to communicate in sounds, trying to discover what he called the primal sounds. Now that's another subject for another book altogether. It was a futile search, of course. If you're interested, I've written about him in my book, if you care to read it. But it's made a great deal of sense to me. Why should we attempt tatty, grandiose productions when we cannot have that same quality of finish, that same architectural excellence, the same execution of lights, the same, detailing in the costumes and everything? Why have, pathetic little versions of that? We can't do that, so forget about that. Let's chuck it all out. And that's what we have been trying. So that's the difference that has happened to me over the last 40 years of doing theatre, that I believed in the theatre of illusion then. I no longer believe in it. I detest realistic plays. It's futile doing realistic plays. I'll tell you why later if you're interested. And I feel that there should be no formality between actors and audience when a play is performed. I don't believe in this creating a big mystery around your play and hiding behind curtains and nobody should appear and all that sort of thing. I don't mind if the audience sees me standing in the wings. They know it's a play. And I know it's a play, and they have to only look from my face to them, they can see the lights. Why should I try convincing them this is actually happening? It's not actually happening. This is a play, ladies and gentlemen. This is a play. Welcome, sit down, I hope you're comfortable. Okay, we're going to start the play now. And we start the play. And it sometimes involves interacting with members of the audience, talking to them and so on, which is not planned, which is spontaneous, but it's dangerous. Because I have found somebody once improvising a line and then forgetting what his next dialogue was. So I believe in theatre which is austere now. I believe very firmly in it. I'm gravitating more and more towards the theatre of storytelling, which means one actor on stage just telling a story.
Mahendra, his question is, where's Mahendra? Yes. What kind of dreams did you have in your childhood? Has your present career been shaped by your childhood dream? If not, then how did you get into this profession? What is the difference between the professional Naseeruddin Shah and the person, the common man Naseeruddin Shah? And here I don't think he means a Wednesday.
What were my dreams? Well, I dreamt that I would be India's greatest cricketer. That was my first dream. Quite seriously, I love cricket. I still love it passionately. But I realized by the time I was about 10 or 11 that there are only 11 people chosen out of this whole country. Yeah, there was no IPL, there was no one-day cricket, there was no big bucks in cricket. Cricketers got 1,000 rupees for a test match. Bishan Singh Bedi himself has told me this. 1,000 rupees for a test match. In fact, he told me a very funny story. He said that they increased it a little bit when he was captain, and they played a match which they won in 3 days. So they paid them only for 3 days. This is true. This is from the horse's mouth. Bishan Singh Bedi himself told me this. So that was my first dream, which was futile. But my love for cricket remains. And then I had no other interest in life apart from cricket and from watching people. That has always been the thing which has interested me most of all, always in life. Just looking at people and watching how they behave. I had no idea it would help me so much in my acting. I wasn't doing it consciously. It's just, I mean, since I wasn't interested in books, I found life more interesting. And I have had no other ambition in life apart from wanting to be an actor. My ideas about what kind of actor I want to be have changed. Like everybody else, I became an actor because I wanted to be popular, I wanted to be famous, I wanted to be rich. Nobody becomes an actor to serve art. I became an actor to meet girls. That's a fact. And also because I think I suffer from an ailment which is known as onomatomania. Onomatomania is from the word onomatopoeic. Onomatopoeic means a word which conveys a sound like slash, bang, whoosh, bam, thud, etc. These are onomatopoeics. So there is an ailment, it's actually an ailment called onomatomania, in which what you do is you keep repeating words, phrases, whole sentences for no reason at all. You just heard them somewhere and you just repeat them. How many of you suffer from onomatomania? You're embarrassed to put up your hands, but I'm sure there are a few. I see some heads nodding, yeah. I think all actors, all people who become actors suffer from this ailment. And it's because of that I managed to memorize whole poems by the time I was in class 4 or 5. I knew speeches from Julius Caesar. I knew a whole lot of things. I could never memorize the tables, of course. And that's how it happened. And then by the time I was in class 9, I decided to do a play, scenes from The Merchant of Venice. And it was the first time I tasted acceptance in my life, because I was a bad student. I was no good at anything except English literature and dictation. I used to get 100 out of 100 in dictation. I used to get the highest marks in composition and text, but I used to get 0 in physics and chemistry. And it never bothered me, because I knew I didn't want to be a doctor. When I was a child, there was only either become a doctor or an engineer or join the army. That's it. If you're very adventurous, go to the tea gardens. I didn't want to do any of these. And that's how it happened. I was consistent in my dreams, I suppose, and I think I was lucky in that I was very certain about my vocation rather early in life. So I was able to focus completely on it. A lot of people who want to be actors take a long time before they admit to themselves that they want to be actors. They feel embarrassed, they feel they'll be laughed at and so on. It's understandable, but it just delays the inevitable. The earlier you start training yourself, the better.
Kaustav is here? Yep. How did he as an actor, or rather, how did you as an actor prepare for the long speech in the film, A Wednesday? And what kind of sensitivity did it require? And he follows up with, which is a freer space to work and experiment as an actor, theatre or film?
Oh, theatre, without a doubt. Because every performance in theatre is a different performance. Every city I go to, I'm always asked, what do you think of the audience here? There is no such thing as a good or a bad audience. There are only good and bad performances. And a bad performance, a bad audience, there's no such thing. There are sometimes difficult audiences. Sometimes the audiences are hostile. But you can win over an audience. The audience has come there to listen to you, not to reject you. Unless you're in an intercollegiate drama contest, of course, you know, and you're there to hoot each other. But I'm not talking of that. But always remember that the audience has come there to listen to you. It's up to you to hold their attention. And if they turn hostile, there's something wrong with your performance. They have not come there to reject you. Always remember that. But what was the question? I forgot. Wednesday. How did I learn? I just worked at it, you know. See, too many actors feel that their job is done once they have learnt their lines. And in fact, many of them assume they have learnt their lines and chuck away the script. And then, if they happen to go back to it 6 months later, they realize they missed out on a lot of important sentences. I never let my actors let go of their scripts, even after they have learnt their lines. I insist that they keep their scripts with them, so that they keep reading what is written and not improvise too early. I do not believe you have the right to improvise until you have worked on the lines as hard as the writer has worked. So learning the lines, learn your lines and don't bump into the furniture. That's the rule of acting, all acting. Forget about all this metaphysical nonsense. Learn your lines and don't bump into the furniture. If you can do that, you got it great. I promise you. So learning the lines was not difficult. It was a couple of pages. I've learned much more than that in plays. But trying to speak those lines with conviction, I had to draw upon experiences I'd had in the city of Bombay. When I was a struggler, when I had to run for shelter, or when the bombs went off, or when I read about accidents or I witness, you know, a chap suffering on the road, or I see a guy helplessly pleading with a policeman who's hell-bent on harassing him. So I had to draw upon these kind of memories, which are all within me and which are within all of us. And not forget that that's not enough. This has to be distilled through the lines. So I did a lot of work on those lines before they became my own, because the temptation was to play it heroic. We all want to play it heroic. I had to fight against that. So, but it was greatly enjoyable, and I'm very proud of that film.
Okay. The last question from the theatre, Asta. Is she here? Asta? Okay. The question is, if you were to choose one difficult role, either theatre or film, which one would it be and why? One difficult role.
Difficult in what sense?
Asta is here.
Difficult to do?
Would you like to clarify, Asta?
I would say any part is difficult when you start it. It becomes easier as you go along, depending upon the degree of labor you put into it. So acting is not an easy job. It seems to come naturally to some people, but those are people who have vast experience and who know how to summon up their their energies and their abilities. So no role is easy, and one should never approach a part by saying ke ho gaya, or it's a very small role or something like that. Never. There is no such thing as a small and a big role. Every part that's there in a play has its own significance. Even if he's just a messenger who comes to deliver a letter, he has his own significance. And even that is not easy to play, because if you have such a small part, you'll feel, okay, I've got to do something to impress the audience. And that's where you fall into the trap of showing off. See, if I name three of the performances I've done in the recent past, one is Einstein, one is Gandhi, and one is playing Bernard Shaw. Now, as I said earlier, it's not possible for me to, it is very flattering, of course, to imagine that I am these people. But in no way am I confused about who I am, or the fact that, you know, I need to know incisively about this person. No, I use my own imagination, because your imagination is the strongest weapon that you have. And imagination and observation go side by side. So never make the mistake of, but sorry, I digressed. To play Gandhiji, I had to play Gandhiji and to play Einstein, I had to conform to how they were. So I had to study photographs of them, voice recordings, films, and so on. But with Ghalib, there's one photograph of him when he was very, very old. There's no recording of his voice. No one knows how tall he was, or how short he was, or how fat or thin, or anything, what he sounded like, etc. So I had to use my imagination almost completely over there. But there were other things I had to practice, like reciting the verse with conviction. I was not familiar with Urdu poetry. It was my introduction, in fact, to Urdu poetry. With Gandhiji, again, I had to find that the body language which every Indian has seen. And so I could not use my imagination there. It was just reproducing what experience. So each part has its own difficulties, and the biggest mistake an actor can make is to approach any role thinking this is easy.
So we move to the students of the film course. The first question is by Dheeraj. There seem to be few independent filmmakers today making films outside the mainstream, unlike in the earlier era during the 70s and late 1980s. What do you think is the reason?
Ratio-wise, it's the same number. If there were 5, then there are maybe 10 now. But then don't forget that the number of people making rubbish has also increased. So ratio-wise, it's the same. There was a spurt in the 70s which everybody mistook for a movement. It wasn't a movement. Otherwise, it would have lasted. It petered out very quickly. It started sometime in the late 60s with films like Bhuvan Shom, Sara Akash. But there was, before that, there were K.A. Abbas making songless movies. Earlier than that, black and white films about slum dwellers. One film actually about a Muslim who has a dilemma about migrating to Pakistan called Asman Mahal. He made a film called Saath Hindustani, which was about the liberation of Goa. All songless movies. But he's somehow forgotten in history, which is sad. Mr. Shantaram also made very significant movies in Marathi in the 30s and 40s. Progressive, about talking of widow remarriage and child abuse and child marriage and all that sort of thing, dowry problems, the Hindu-Muslim enmities and so on. And then it's kind of petered out. Shantaram Sahab went into this Technicolor fantasy and made the most god-awful movies for some years. Abbas Sahab became too old to make any more. Then along came Mrinal Sen and Basu Chatterjee and people like that who made Teesri Qasam and these kind of movies. And then there was a spurt, suddenly, with the success of Ankur in 73, I think it was, 74. And suddenly, a whole lot of young filmmakers sprouted, some of whom made pretty good movies too. But most of them were just dying to jump onto the bandwagon. And the first chance they got, they did. They abandoned the ship instantly. Those who did not taste success continued to make meaningful cinema. But they only did it because they had no alternative. And I know these people well, so I can say this with certainty. As I was talking to Professor Prasad earlier, that they were making films about integrity, which is one quality a lot of them lacked. And that's why this movement didn't last. But there were the stray people. There was the Adur Gopalakrishnan in Malayalam. There was Mrinal Sen in Bengali. There was a person like Mani Kaul, much as I dislike his movies, but the fact is he stuck to his guns and made the kind of movies he believed in. So I have a grudging admiration for the man. There were a few people who continued, persevered. And those are the people who have spawned the younger filmmakers of today with promise. But again, I detect the same dangerous signs of these people dying to jump into the mainstream. And that, I believe, is the biggest mistake they can make, because you introduce a star into a movie that's trying to be real, and the movie immediately turns false. A star is a person who's supposed to be predictable. A star must give the audience what they're expecting. A star is a person who must be synthetic, and he's practiced for years to be synthetic. And he's not capable of anything else. He's become synthetic in his real life as well. And you cast him in a role where you expect him to play a lower middle class clerk, he can't do it. In the same way as I could never play a Superman of the kind you see in the Hindi movies. So each actor has his own limitations. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Sneha is here? Yes. How can a film culture that inculcates the habit of watching non-mainstream cinema or independent cinema be created in today's audience?
Well, that's a tough one. By making better movies, I suppose. The hopeful sign is that a lot of very good movies are being made of late, have come out of late, and have worked at the box office too. It's important that these people realize that the only answer is to keep their budgets down. Because a film like Wednesday is considered such a success only because it was made very, very cheaply. If it had cost 25 crores to make, it would have been considered a flop. But this temptation is, these carrots are dangled in front of promising filmmakers. That, look, you get so much, and you get an all-India release, and I'll get you X, Y, and Z to star in it. It's very difficult for a young filmmaker who desperately wants to make his movie to say no to a deal like that. But that's the courage that's required in order to stick to your guns, the way an Adur Gopalakrishnan has, the way a Mrinal Sen has. I think of very few others.
Watching mostly mainstream cinema. So, as a audience, how can we have that idea or habit of watching non-mainstream?
It won't happen overnight. It won't happen overnight. You see, I think we are greatly influenced by our parents, in childhood at least, by our parents' tastes in cinema, because we get to watch only the movies they approve of. You have to outgrow that. And you have to learn how to forgive your parents. And we'll just start doing it yourself, Make a resolution that you won't watch a movie just for the heck of it. Have a reason. Even if you want to go and see Welcome Back, which I haven't seen, by the way, you must have a reason for seeing it, not just to 3 hours air conditioning mein baithenge, And as I said earlier, try to understand what it is about a movie that makes you like it or makes you dislike it. And it's a long process and it'll go on through your life, but get into the habit of doing that. Don't just learn to swallow anything that comes your way.
Dheeraj is here, no? I thought I saw, yes. How do you balance between accepting roles in alternate or non-mainstream cinema and the mainstream films? How do you balance?
It's very easy, the money. See, I get offered a lot of parts by people who are trying to make different kind of movies, and I respect each of them enough to at least go through the first 15 or 20 pages of every script I receive. I don't read them all through because, when I eat an egg at breakfast, I don't have to eat the whole egg to know that it's bad. So I go by my instinct. I try to figure out, am I going to enjoy this thing or not? Enjoyment to me is most important and has always been. Am I going to have a good time doing this or not? And that's the reason I choose to do a Finding Fanny or a Jackpot or any other movie that I've done. And my instinct is not always correct. I've made plenty of blunders, but I have no other way to decide. I must feel like doing it, whether because of the script, or whether because of the director, or whether because of the part, or whether because of the location it's being shot in, or whether because of the money. There is a specific reason each time.
It's not going the direction that was actually. How do you try to minimize the
Suffering. No way. Then you are in sheer undiluted hell. And there isn't a thing you can do about it. The money is a smallish compensation at such times, you know. And very often there are movies where I've done for very little money which have turned out like that. And then you feel like cutting your throat as soon as possible, you know. It's a mistake you've made, you've got to live with it. So there have been many such events in my life where I've been thoroughly miserable making the movie, and it shows. Yeah. So you have to, I'm unable to find a way to disguise that, my loathing for a particular movie I'm in.
I don't know who has asked this from the class. What is your take on censorship in cinema, especially when we see cases where item songs that usually commodify women are allowed in movies, but certain scenes from James Bond movies are deleted?
Yeah. It's quite ridiculous. Let me tell you a little story about a film I did called Bombay Boys many years ago, in which there was a scene of a juggi where the people in the juggi are watching a film on this kind of screens they hang up. So on both sides of the screen, audiences sit and watch. And what the director had was this song by Govinda and somebody else, a most thoroughly, disgustingly obscene song, which had been passed by the censors and which had shown on television screens all over the country. He had that, and the censors said, you have to cut this. So Kaizad, who was a young man making his first movie, came and said, please come with me and talk to this censor board, who turned out to be Asha Parekh, the chairman of the censor board. So I went and spoke to her, and I said, why are you asking for this to be deleted? Because this is something that has been passed by the censor board, and this is a song the whole country has seen. And we are making a point by showing this disgustingly vulgar song. We're making a point. She said, no, it is giving Hindi films a bad name. Would you believe this? So I said, but your censor board has passed this song. She said, no, it was the earlier censor board. So I considered asking her whether we could use her song, Aaja, 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 with English subtitles. But of course I did not. and we had to remove that portion of the song and use another less disgusting part of the song, which really killed. So that's the censorship in our country. It is subject to the whims and fancies of a few individuals who are probably not qualified to be there. The people who are qualified don't care to be on a censor board, as the case of Leela Samson, and my wife's aunt Ratna Shanta Gandhi was also on it, and she said, you can't imagine the torture it is like to sit through 2 Hindi films every day. You know. I think that does something to the censor's brains, and the brains go soft. It's not a question that can be easily resolved. Should or should there not be censorship? Because we are not great at self-censorship, you know. It's a point that will be argued till the cows come home. I believe there should not be any censorship, but I'm saying that assuming that we have a sense of responsibility. I'm not so sure about that.
Well, I could detect that evening that the class was very disappointed that James Bond did not get his kiss.
Oh, well.
Anyway, next is from Utkarsh. Yeah. The role of a filmmaker seems to be more important than a scientist or a philosopher because of the larger audience and the scope of dissemination of ideas. So he's...
We rarely see filmmakers who try to get into the scientific and philosophical questions of existence or truth, and then you try to metaphorize this idea into a story and present to the audience. So there is something we rarely see in India. So how What do you feel about it?
See, you have to be very well qualified to make the kind of philosophical movies that Tarkovsky used to make, you know, or Anand Gandhi's film also, which was an excellent piece of work. Most filmmakers are not in the business to philosophize. They are there to tell stories. So the cinema philosopher, I think we're lucky even if we get one, you know. The true cinema artist, in how many hundreds of years does the cinema artist appear? How many have appeared in India here? Very few. So it's I really can't answer the question. There need to be more people philosophically inclined and also with an aptitude to tell a story in pictures. It's not an easy combination, you know. It's like being asked to bowl with your right hand and your left hand. You know, to bowl space with your right hand and spin with your left hand. It's a tough combination. One can only hope. But the discouraging thing is Anand hasn't made another movie since then. I don't know what he's up to. I think he must be finding it difficult to raise the money.
Sneha again, how does one appreciate or become aware of the nuances in a film? For example, the use of music by the director in an aesthetic manner, an aesthetic cut in the editing, the visual style. Can this awareness or skill of appreciating such nuances be inculcated in an audience?
I guess it can, though an aesthetic touch for the sake of an aesthetic touch is something I don't quite agree with. An effective cut or an effective transition must serve the purposes of the narrative, is what I feel. There's too many of our, particularly Film Institute filmmakers, who do what I like to call the director's dance. You know, by which I mean empty shots of empty corridors, and the camera slowly tracking down it and nothing happening. Or a door opening and shutting and opening and shutting again, and opening and shutting again, and opening and shutting again. You know? Or a character sitting down and sitting down again, and sitting down again. And I don't know what that's all about. So I think aesthetics for the sake of aesthetics are not desirable. You have to watch movies carefully, I suppose. You'd be astonished to hear that when I was a student at the drama school, Professor Satish Bahadur from FTII came over to give us an initiation. And he told us about when a shot cuts from one to the other, and I was actually astonished to learn that a scissors is actually used and a piece of film is cut and then joined together like this. It was an information to me when I was 22 years old. I had been watching movies for the last 20 years. And a change of scene is something, but this hadn't even occurred to me, that this is how it's done. So I guess you are gradually being made aware of the rudiments. It depends on your ability to perceive how much you're able to see in a movie.
Cuts, and it should be something that's more fluid that way.
Sure, but a film student should be able to observe this.
As an audience, though, isn't it more?
That's why it is important to see the movie that you wish to understand more than once. First, it is valid to just respond to it and then analyze it, for which you need to see it again. So for a student, I would say it is necessary, though of course you're right that when all these things don't intrude, I mean, the best acting is when you don't notice that it's acting. The most effective moment is when you don't notice the technique behind. You know, the technique is not visible.
Films, being a powerful medium, have a way of reinforcing stereotypes. Filmmakers therefore need to be more responsible, show the necessary restraint in what they portray. What is your opinion?
Yeah, it connects to the earlier question that you asked. It's that filmmakers have a greater role to play than scientists. Then they have a greater responsibility as well. Because a fake movie also can affect the audience. Fake emotions can bring tears to your eyes. So it's the filmmaker's responsibility is as great as that of a scientist. But reinforcing stereotypes, yeah, we are happy with them. Now you got to start rejecting them as an audience. Only then will the filmmakers stop using them. You're happy. I mean, you still applaud when Asrani does his stupid shtick in Sholay, which is copied from Charles Chaplin, and which he does very, very badly. But everybody loves it. What can you do about that? I mean, I personally don't find it the slightest bit funny. It's offensive, in fact, to me to watch that and to see the way audiences lap it up. So you've got to stop accepting stereotypes, first of all, as audiences, as film students. You've got to refuse to be satisfied with them. Then maybe the filmmakers will change their habits. Otherwise, they are happy to just steal from here and there. As one renowned screenwriter says, क्या original बात करते हैं? Original वो होता है जिसका source ना पता चले.
When people start imitating cinema in real life, doesn't it get dangerous? Tamanna, is she here? Okay, she is referring to the recent incident where a Snapdeal employee was abducted by a person who claimed that he acted or was influenced by the movie Dar.
I think there are also a large number of children who have tied a red towel to their necks and jumped off a staircase, thinking they are Superman. So Superman is equally dangerous. I think as far as combing your hair or wearing your shirt or wearing a medallion around your neck is concerned, that is how much people emulate cinema. I don't think it leaves such a deep impact on you that it would affect your thinking. I've actually met a guy who says to me कि मुझ में जितनी अच्छाइयाँ हैं वो सब हिंदी सिनेमा की वजह से हैं. So I said, what do you mean by that? He says, देखिए हिंदी सिनेमा क्या सिखाती है? देशभक्ति सिखाती है, बड़ों की इज्जत करो, हैं? माँ बाप का आदर करो, टीचर्स की इज्जत करो, देश से प्यार करो, ये वो वगैरह. हर कोई हिंदी फिल्म ये नहीं कहती कि चोरी करो, डाका डालो, स्मगलर बन जाओ, खून करो. ये सारे वैल्यूज सही वैल्यूज हैं. तो भाई अगर फिल्म्स का इतना ही इन्फ्लुएंस है, why isn't the whole population affected by them? I don't believe they have that much influence as they are. Filmmakers overrate their own importance because, as I said before, making a film is a very, very difficult job. It breaks your back, and so you overestimate your own importance. वरना तो हर एक को भी बिल्कुल रिश्वत नहीं लेनी चाहिए, सबको माँ बाप का आदर करना चाहिए, सबको ईमानदारी से जिंदगी गुजारनी चाहिए, राइट? कितने लोग करते हैं?
This is regarding the Oscar mania we were discussing in class. So the question was, does the choice of films that India nominates for the Oscars reflect a bias towards mainstream movies?
Now, why are we bothered about the Oscars? The Oscars are as fake as the Pan Masala Awards. See, you know, I've been visiting Pakistan recently. I've also acted in 2 Pakistani movies. And they in Pakistan look upon our Bombay cinema as the ultimate in the world. And we look upon Hollywood as the ultimate in the world. Every paradigm is Hollywood. That's why we call ourselves Bollywood and Follywood and Tollywood and Collywood and God knows what else. As if Hollywood is the only reference point. I hate this word Bollywood. It should be called Follywood. You know? And the Oscars are of no concern to us. I don't know why we even bother sending our films into that competition. Some poor Marathi guy court. I mean, where is he going to get the resources to lobby for his film to win an Oscar? You've got to spend $1 million to even get the voters' attention. And Court is a movie which is absolutely excellent. I don't know if you people have seen it. It is really worthy of, you know, all the awards possible, but it's got nothing. Not even our Pan Masala award.
As an artist, you may have a desire to act or perform certain types of roles, but you may not be able to do so because of the prevailing environment. Is that a dilemma that you have had to face, and how have you overcome that? Prabhat, is he here? Yes, Prabhat has asked that question.
Yeah, I actually tell you the truth, Prabhat. I don't have that ambition anymore to perform different type of roles. There was a time when I did. I wanted to play this and that and everything else, and, you know, explore every aspect of myself. I've realized over the years that your own performance is secondary to the content. Your performance is not an end in itself. All your abilities as an actor are meant to be at the service of the script. So I don't look forward, and I haven't for the last 15 or so years, to playing this kind of role or that kind of role. Of course, when I was young, I wanted to play, you know, everybody wants to play Batman and Tarzan, and everybody wants to do that. But, and because I wanted to do a film like Jalwa where I could put on muscle, you know, so I did all that. No longer do I have those kind of dreams. I want to be part of a project which A, I will enjoy, and B, which might be remembered. That is my ambition as an actor. There are no roles I'm dying to play, because doing a play because you want to do a particular role is not a good reason to do the play. Then it's tantamount to showing off that, you know, I can do King Lear, and I can do Don Quixote, and I can do Shylock. You know. Acting is not an end in itself. Acting is meant to be at the service of the script. It's taken me a long time to realize that, which is why I'm very glad you asked this question. And I really would like to emphasize this to all young actors here, that the reason you act is not to show off your acting. Certain examples notwithstanding, of some very good actors who love to just show off how well they can act for no reason at all. We all know how well they can act. I don't see what the reason of trying to prove it over and over again. Your acting is done so that you can communicate what the writer and director wish to communicate. If you fail in communicating that, you are giving a bad performance. No matter how many faces you can make, no matter how many false tears you can produce, no matter how many expressions you can give in 5 seconds. It's bad acting if you are communicating the wrong thing to the audience. An actor's job is to communicate, not to display his wares. Okay?
Regarding movies like Iqbal, Wednesday, they are giving some message. There are many of movies like these are different kind of stream. It's not mainstream. So you choice on script, or you choose any of the movies?
I don't choose any movie. As I said before, I chose, since you're asking particularly about Iqbal and, what is the other one? Wednesday, yeah. I chose them individually. They had nothing to do with each other. I chose one. I chose Iqbal because I thought it was a great story, and I love cricket, and I would get to play a lot of cricket. I wasn't paid too much money for it. Wednesday, I felt, would be a very important film. It needed to be made. This statement had to be made. Again, I got paid very little money. I did a Pakistani film called Khuda Ke Liye, which is, I think, the most important film I've done in my life. Because the questions that film raised are questions which have bothered me also. So there are different reasons for doing different movies, and one does a welcome back, obviously, for the money.
Just to clarify to the class, I have dropped some questions which have already been asked, like Ganauri's. Okay. So the last question is, theatre audience is a niche audience, unlike with cinema. How do you reach out to a larger audience in the theatre space?
That is a futile dream. Everybody asks me, why can't theatre be as popular as cinema? How can it possibly be? Because a play can only be done in one place at one time, on one night, to a certain number of people. A movie can be shown to 10 million people at the same time all over the world. So there's no question of competing, and why should we want to compete with cinema? I'm also asked, how come we don't have a Broadway? Thank God we don't have a Broadway. We have Hindi cinema. We don't need Broadway. If you want Hindi cinema, the theatre to be as popular as Hindi movies, then you've got to do plays like Welcome Back, you know. Sorry to go on about that, I can't think of any other names. Yeah. And do we want to do plays like that? I don't think so. And even if we do, the audience will not flock to them the way they'd flock to a movie. Because you can't create the same illusion, you can't transport them to Dubai and here and there and everywhere. They can't be jumping off planes in parachutes and so on. So it can never be, and it's a futile hope. Theatre will always be a niche activity. It will have a few people. We must not think of England and America and see what happened in those countries. It's not that we don't have a tradition, we have an older tradition than they did. But after the world wars, they started building theatres. They encouraged playwriting. They encouraged people to go to the theatres as a distraction. So you will find everywhere in London or in New York, where there's a theatre, there's always a train station very nearby. So they made it easy for people to get to the theatres. They made it convenient for them to get to the theatres. So theatre going continued as a habit. Now in Bombay, we have the Prithvi Theatre, which is in Juhu, and we have the NCPA, which is at the northernmost end, southernmost end of Bombay. People who live in places like Chembur and Thana can't go to either place. So we have to go to them. So it's theatre people, if you want to perform to wider audiences, you've got to take the initiative and go out and find those audiences. They're not going to come to you because it isn't convenient. You have to go to them. And that's all really that's needed to do a play. Another thing I'd like to say to people who want to do theatre is, don't wait around for the ideal time. Don't wait for a perfect cast of actors, for an auditorium to be available, for rehearsal space to be available, for a great play to come your way. Just get up and do it. Find a play with 2 characters, there are plenty. Find a solo piece, find a poem, find a story, anything you want. All you need to create theatre is an empty space which can be this large. You need 1 text and 1 actor, that's all you need. You don't need anything else. If you wait around, auditorium, auditorium. When I was a student in Delhi, application after application went to the Home Ministry saying, we need theatres, we need theatres, we need theatres. So the government built a whole lot of theatres. In Mandi House, there's an area in Delhi called Mandi House where the drama school is. In that area of about maybe 3 or 4 square miles, there are about 12 theatres. And hardly 2 of them are used every day. They're just lying empty. So having more auditoria is not the answer. Your desire to communicate something would be the answer, because that's what theatre is all about. Stimulating the listener's imagination and communicating an idea.
Yes.
Yes.
I left 10 years back, but today also regional theatres like Marathi and Gujarati are doing pretty well compared to English or Hindi. So what I noticed is, like, even in Marathi, the actors, they seamlessly move from theatre to TV to films. So that is, the content recently has gone up in Marathi films, what I have seen.
So that's the reason why I was feeling why Hindi theatre was not doing that well.
The craft of playwriting has not evolved in our country. You'd be hard put to think of a single writer of plays in Hindi. There was Mohan Rakesh. He's the only one whose name we can take immediately. और उन्होंने भी 4 नाटक लिखे हैं. Apart from him, who can you think of? Dharamveer Bharti, who wrote one play, Andhayug. Who else? Among Marathi, there are so many. Among Kannada, there are so many. Among Bengali, there are many. But in Hindi, we don't. Hindi, the monster of cinema has done it. Marathi theatre has always been vibrant. These days, it's undergoing a bit of a slump because they're veering towards more of what they imagine would be popular plays. Family dramas about an old couple abandoned by their son who lives in America. I mean, every second Marathi play is about that. Sloppy, sentimental stuff which you wouldn't be able to sit through. A lot of it. Gujarati theatre has always been lousy. They've always, copied Western comedies or farces or even Marathi plays or so that's not worth talking about. English and Hindi are just about surviving. But the Marathi audiences are something. If you've ever seen a play at Shivaji Mandir, for example, on a working day, 11 o'clock in the morning, you'll see a full house of working people who probably slimed away from their offices or something. And they'll applaud at various places in the play, but not at the end of the play. Yeah, when the play ends, they get up and walk off.
Since we have a little time left, and before we throw it open, Mayura and I have a question.
Yes.
Before I give it to Mayura, I'll ask mine. One thing Wednesday points out to is this righteous indignation, especially the common man. And we do live in times now where, presently, where you do go through this. And even the theme of Wednesday, where, especially people living in Mumbai, I don't know that because I've not lived in Mumbai through such times, nor I in Chennai or particularly in Bangalore face such a situation. But nevertheless, as a person, you do go through a sense of helplessness with the situation, especially now that's going on in Delhi. But there is also the danger of vigilantism. So how do you look at that? A film like Wednesday poses that. Here the gentleman takes law into his...
Yeah, the question where I see my brother who served in the army thought that Wednesday is a very dangerous film. He said you acted very well and all that, but it's a dangerous movie and I don't think such movie should be made. So I said, no, come on, why are you saying that? Well, he says it advocates the wrong thing. Firstly, why are all the terrorists shown as Muslims? He had a point there. Why couldn't there have been a Sri Lankan also? Why couldn't there have been a Tamilian suicide bomber as well? Why all 4 Muslims? That's a valid, and I spoke to the filmmaker about it and he said, "Ye to galati ho gayi." He said, I never realized it. And I said, I swear it's not done consciously. But he says, yeah, I agree it's a mistake. I should not have done it. So that's as much as the filmmaker is able to conceive. But if you look at it otherwise, Wednesday is not a dangerous movie because what it's advocating is something nobody could ever pull off. It's a pure fantasy. It's as much of a fantasy as Superman. How could you pull off a stunt like this guy pulls off? Impossible. It's purely in the realm of fantasy. It is set in a realistic environment. So that's why I guess it's a little bit, disturbing, and it strikes an authentic note because it's shot on real locations and so on, and doesn't have songs and dances and extraneous things. But it's as much of a fantasy as any other entertaining movie. It's not advocating that anybody do such a thing. It's in fact presenting a situation which is well nigh impossible. As impossible as a man putting on a cape and flying.
See, in cinema, especially in India, post-1991 cinema has seen rural India almost vanish off the map. Unlike the cinema before that, some of the films that you have acted in, where to an extent there was an authenticity to rural India. Why do you think that has happened?
Well, it wasn't an authenticity. It was a Hindi film version of rural India, but at least it was a pan-Indian kind of thing. There's no such thing as a pan-Indian movie anymore. Now they're all regions for regions, and the theatre going, the movie theatre going culture has itself dwindled. Even in the, I'm sure, in the villages and so on, those mobile theatres, and I think they're a thing of the past. Small theatres which they had. People, everybody probably watched them in video parlors or in their homes any longer. So who would care to make a film about the villages? The villages themselves are disappearing. Either malls are coming up there or the dams are flooding them. So there is really anybody who knows about the problems about Indian villages, who's living in Bombay. I'd say it's a good thing that they're not staying on Malabar Hill and making films about the starving peasants of Bihar. You know?
Yeah. So over to Mayura.
Thank you. I have actually two questions that I wanted to ask you, and before that I want to say thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself with us today, and for giving us this opportunity to become re-enchanted with theatre and film once again. My first question is about a question which was posed by someone else, but it keeps coming back to me, and that is, what should theatre be? And there is somebody who's responded to that saying, should theatre really be anything? And why does it have to be something? But very often I find that, you know, when I'm speaking with people, or even if I'm questioning a few things about what I imagine theatre should be about, very often we find that theatre is either telling us things that, you know, it's very message-oriented, so it becomes a bit preachy sometimes, or that theatre becomes very text-driven, so we don't know if there's a space for theatre outside of this kind of text-driven, script-based, play-oriented theatre, and what is the direction for contemporary theatre then? Where should theatre go as we go forward, in your view?
Let me quote Grotowski again. One actor, one audience. That's his definition of ideal theatre. One actor, one audience. In other words, when you speak, I listen. When I speak, you listen. And the roles are interchangeable. One actor, one audience, and the roles are interchangeable. Later on, of course, he went a little further into saying actor and audience are one, which was something very far out, which, you know, is kind of difficult to comprehend. But seeing the trip he was on, one could understand it. It'll take a bit of time to explain exactly what he was doing. But it wasn't at all connected with theatre as we understand it. But this definition of one actor, one audience makes complete and utter sense to me. The purpose of it should be to get something across, whatever it may be. An idea, a philosophy, a story, a joke, anything. An exchange of energies. That's what must occur. And that is why that's why the audience is so precious to actors. Because there's something very intimate that is exchanged between actors and audience. And that is why I love performing to small audiences, because it's easier to get across to each and every one. So that is how I would define it. Exchange of energies.
Can I just add another thing to that? Is that there seems to be that, although you said there are, you know, a number of these theatre spaces which are there, and we don't have enough performances playing in them, but at the same time we don't have enough theatre spaces which are different from the conventional theatre space, which is also...
Yeah, but those have to be explored and found. There are people in Bombay who are attempting it, who are performing in abandoned warehouses, in abandoned factories, in restaurants, in classrooms, in cafes, in people's homes, and so on. So that is exactly what I was saying to you people. Don't wait around for the ideal thing. You gotta get enough space tomorrow. Just do a play there. Have 3 people watching it. That's a start, at least. Hopefully it won't stay at that.
Thank you.
So we'll throw it open for 10-15 minutes before we wind up. After Karishma, share. Yes, Karishma.
What is your...
Normally it's very done in a very condescending way, the same way as, you know, in Hindi movies you can't distinguish between a guy who's drunk and a guy who's lost his wits. Here also it's caricaturized, and the belief is that it would be unpalatable if it were presented accurately. The fact is, we don't have the writers with the skill to present a thing like that accurately. It's very rare. A film like Margarita perhaps comes closest, but there's not too many others I can think of. I mean, you end up seeing some of the films like, you know, a thing like Khilona, which was a film I saw in college. I mean, it just leaves you aghast at its portrayal of a mentally challenged person. See, the trouble is that stock characterizations are enough for us, both for the makers as well as for the viewers. Blacks and whites. A script in a Hindi movie is seldom written keeping the interaction of the characters in mind. It is written keeping the status of the various actors in mind. That's a fact. I have with my own eyes witnessed a scene where a prisoner is brought in and the policeman was asked to stand up and address the prisoner as sir. Why? Because the prisoner was being played by a star and this was being played by a newcomer. Try explaining to anybody that this is not right, and they say, "Kisse baat kar rahe ho yaar?" Real life relationships intrude into the script. So where do you expect the script to go? And as I said more and more, that's the danger of all these young filmmakers who show great promise, succumbing to this pressure of casting a star and then kidding themselves into believing that the star is doing what they want. In fact, the fact is they are preempting what the star wants and giving it to him before he asks for it.
Yes.
Were you convinced by, in the movie of were you convinced by whatever the answer which you gave in the end? Yes. You were convinced?
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with it. And in fact, it put it in a way which I could not have put it. Really. ना बनाने वालों को समझ है, ना देखने वालों को। और ये तो बहुत ही, ये सिर्फ भारत में नहीं होता। आप हॉलीवुड की भी फिल्में देखें, जितने सपोर्टिंग कैरेक्टर्स होंगे वो सब बहुत ही बाइज्जत थिएटर के एक्टर्स होंगे, ज़्यादातर अंग्रेज जो हॉलीवुड की फिल्मों में पैसों के लिए काम करते हैं। अब दो एग्जाम्पल मैं देता हूँ आपको। डॉक्टर श्रीराम लागू मराठी के बहुत बड़े एक्टर थे। आई कंसिडर हिम द ग्रेटेस्ट थिएटर एक्टर आई हैव सीन इन दिस कंट्री, परहैप्स अमंग द ग्रेटेस्ट आई हैव सीन इन द वर्ल्ड। पर उनको याद कैसे किया जाएगा? बाय द काइंड ऑफ रोल्स ही इज डन इन दीज मूवीज। और नीलू फुले एक दूसरे एक्टर थे, मराठी एक्टर। बोथ आर वर्ल्ड क्लास एक्टर्स, बट उनको ये इस तरह की फिल्में करनी पड़ी। एंड अनफॉर्चुनेटली इन द फ्यूचर पीपल ने तो उनके थिएटर परफॉर्मेंसेस तो देखे नहीं होंगे। सो ये तो एक ट्रेजेडी है। अब क्या करें भाई, आप शैतान को अपनी रूह बेचोगे तो कुछ कीमत तो अदा करनी पड़ेगी ना।
We might not be able to plunge ourselves into this field because of other commitments or other things that come into our lives, which is a priority to us as well. So what kind of scope or space do you think or you suggest that such people could take forward and keep their passion intact?
To be involved in theatre in as much of a capacity as you can be. a lot of the very good actors in the Marathi theatre, all people who worked in other professions. People like Dr. Sriram Lagu, Dr. Kashinath Ghanekar, Mohan Agashe, many of them. A lot of them were doctors, some of them were teachers, some were people in other professions, and who did theatre as a hobby and continued to do it, and gradually it became a profession. So it might not happen that way with everybody, but the thing is that if you love something, you'll be able to find the time for it. That's what I believe. If you really like to do something, no matter how busy you may be, you'll find the time for it. Right? Don't you find the time to see Hindi movies? Aha.
I thought there was a hand up.
That I felt, you said that cinema should actually represent the sensibilities of the times. I feel like that's more relevant to people from our generation than probably when I think of my dad who went through your generation. So I sat and watched Vigilantism, and he was like, how can he live with a girl without getting married? How can she just run off like that? How can his wife accept that? And things like that. So don't you feel that some of the movies that were made in the 70s, the 80s, like these are pretty far out, like Masoom, and they talk about relationships and complexities. They seem more relevant right now than I can't relate to.
So that's the sign of a good piece of work, where it doesn't seem dated at all, that you feel, hey, this could have happened today, this could have happened to me, this could have happened to a person I know. So it really, I think these are movies that have stood the test of time. Of a certain kind of guy, I would say, because it wasn't really a picture of any particular society. It was a character study of these three people. This guy who's weak and who gives in to temptation, giving up a perfectly good wife and going in for this flighty, flaky sort of girl, but then it conforms to tradition. He goes right back to the wife at the end, which so it was really a pretty interesting story. I don't think it purported to be a truthful picture of any particular society of people, because he was just a photographer. He wasn't, and the whole film was shot on sets and so on. The surroundings were not that important in that movie. Whereas Masoom was shot in Delhi, but you're right when you say that both these stories could have happened in any time. So it retains its relevance.
Yes.
एक्टर की कोई ऑटोनॉमी नहीं होती। एक्टर को अपनी बिलीफ्स जाहिर करने का कोई मौका नहीं मिलता। एक्टर का काम है दूसरों के बिलीफ्स को कन्वे करना ऑडियंस तक। आप एज एन एक्टर आपके अपने बिलीफ्स उस बात से पता चलेंगे कि आप क्या क्या काम करते हो, दैट इज योर बिलीफ्स। लेकिन अगर आपके बिलीफ्स राइटर के बिलीफ्स से क्लैश करते हैं तो आपको वो काम करना ही नहीं चाहिए। बट वंस यू हैव डन इट, देन इट इज योर जॉब कि राइटर और डायरेक्टर के बिलीफ्स को आप क्लियरली कम्युनिकेट करो, चाहे आप उससे सहमत हो या ना हो। और अगर सहमत नहीं है तो आपको वो काम करना ही नहीं चाहिए। इट्स एज सिंपल एज दैट।
More and more, over the time, how do you see the cinema world responding towards this? When movies getting more and more towards the screen, there is a big public, like a bunch of people watching it, laughing together. It's changing slowly. So how is the cinema world responding towards this?
I really don't know in which direction to go. It's fascinating to think, but what worries me is the amount of contribution by the computers in today's movies. I'm just dying to see a movie where there's no CG, we're just simple people talking to each other. But if you really think about it, cinema going has always been a solitary experience. When the lights go out, you are alone in the dark by yourself, unlike in the theatre, which is a collective experience. Cinema going has always been a solitary experience, which is why the smaller it becomes, perhaps the better. I mean, people watch movies on their telephones now, and doesn't bother them, and they watch the whole thing for 3 hours on their telephone. The size of it, etc., doesn't make any difference. So it's becoming more and more evident that this collective viewing of cinema is probably a thing of the past, and that is why the movies are perhaps becoming more urgent, smaller, and of very, very low budgets, because that's exactly what's needed, because more and more stuff is needed to be seen. Everybody's watching movies on their computers and their phones and so on. But where this will go, I really can't imagine what the next step will be. Because now, in a movie, you can show just anything you like. You can create a whole universe. What next? I really don't know. I wonder if I'll be around to see it. अलीगढ़ यूनिवर्सिटी में एक रूल है कि लड़के और लड़कियां एक साथ स्टेज पे नहीं आ सकते. स्टूडेंट लोग. तो हमारी एक उस्ताद थी जो प्ले करना चाहती थी, जिसमें लड़की थी, तो शी मैनेज्ड इट कि उन्होंने एक रिसर्च स्कॉलर को रख दिया उसमें इंस्टेड ऑफ अ स्टूडेंट. दैट्स हाउ वी मैनेज टू डू द प्लेज देयर. वरना जो प्लेज हम करते थे उनमें सब मर्द होते थे, क्योंकि लड़कियां तो स्टेज पे आ ही नहीं सकती वहाँ पर. और एक अजीब से टाइम वॉप में पकड़ा हुआ है वो शहर. बहुत ही हसीन यूनिवर्सिटी है, बहुत ही अच्छे डिपार्टमेंट्स हैं वहाँ, कई तरह के. हिस्ट्री डिपार्टमेंट तो इज प्रॉब्ली द बेस्ट इन द कंट्री. एक थिएटर है वहाँ पे कैनेडी हाउस के नाम से, जो मेरे ख्याल से सन 60 में या 62 में बना था. मैं वहाँ 1967 में गया, तो बहुत ही शानदार है वो. लेकिन उस थिएटर में स्टेज पे कुछ नहीं है. तब भी नहीं था और अब भी नहीं है. ना पर्दे हैं, ना विंग्स हैं, ना बैकड्रॉप है, कुछ नहीं है. सिर्फ एक स्टेज है, एक फुटबॉल फील्ड जितना बड़ा, लिटरली एज बिग एज दिस रूम, वो स्टेज है. और रिवॉल्विंग स्टेज भी लगाया हुआ है, जिसकी मशीनरी कभी फिक्स नहीं की गई. एक वेस्टर्न ड्रामा क्लब था और एक हिंदुस्तानी ड्रामा क्लब था, जिसमें 2 मेंबर्स जो कुछ नहीं करते थे. तो ये हालत थी अलीगढ़ यूनिवर्सिटी की. बट मेरी खुशकिस्मती थी कि मुझे 2 टीचर्स ऐसे मिल गए जिन्होंने मुझे प्लेज पढ़ने पर मजबूर किया और इंट्रोड्यूस्ड मी टू अ लॉट ऑफ लिटरेचर जो मैं अदरवाइज शायद ना पढ़ता. यूनिवर्सिटी की कल्पना ये है जहाँ स्टूडेंट्स की बात सुनी जाए और जहाँ स्टूडेंट्स जिम्मेदारी से अपनी बात कहें. जी.
चाहे वो तुगलक हो, चाहे वो जाने भी तो यार हो, चाहे गालिब हो, बट आपको किस तरह की स्टोरी से हमेशा अट्रैक्ट किया है जो आपका मन था करने का कि मैं, बिकॉज बीइंग एन हिस्ट्री ग्रेजुएट, मुझे लगता है बहुत सीरियस थिएटर करने का हमेशा शुरू से आपका मन रहा होगा. आपने बहुत सीरियस थिएटर किया होगा. आप किसने ज़्यादा अट्रैक्ट किया शुरू से?
मैं सिर्फ इतना जानता हूँ कि जो भी ड्रामास मैंने किए हैं वो ऐसे हैं सब के सब जो पहली ही बार पढ़ने पर मैंने फैसला किया कि ये मुझे करना है. अब ये मैं दावा नहीं करता कि हर दफ़ा वो नाटक मेरी समझ में आया, पहली दफ़ा नहीं. वो करते करते समझ में आता है. कभी भी कोई भी कॉम्प्लिकेटेड पीस ऑफ राइटिंग अपने आप को रिवील नहीं करती इतनी जल्दी. आपको उसे बार बार पढ़ना पड़ेगा टू अंडरस्टैंड इट. और नाटक करने में एडवांटेज ये है कि आपको बार बार पढ़ना पड़ता है. तो नेचुरली शेक्सपियर से तो शुरुआत हुई थी, क्योंकि अंग्रेजी स्कूल में मैं पढ़ा था, तो मैं समझता था शेक्सपियर ही एक है प्ले राइट दुनिया में. धीरे धीरे हिंदुस्तानी लेखकों से भी मेरा थोड़ा तारुफ हुआ और मैंने हिंदुस्तानी नाटक पढ़ने शुरू किए. फिर हिंदुस्तानी ज़बान में कहानियाँ मैंने पढ़नी शुरू की. क्योंकि नाटक तो बहुत कम है, लेकिन मैं करना चाहता था ड्रामा अपनी ज़बान में, तो इसलिए इस्मत चुगताई की कहानियाँ, सादत हसन मंटो की कहानियाँ, मुंशी प्रेमचंद की कहानियाँ, ये सब हम लोग मंच पे करते हैं। ये मैं डिफाइन नहीं कर सकता कि किस तरह का प्ले मुझे अट्रैक्ट करता है, क्योंकि हमने हर तरह के ही प्लेस किए हैं। मैं इस बात से नहीं चाहता कि अब एक कॉमेडी की जाए या अब एक हिस्टोरिकल किया जाए। आई डोंट गो लाइक दैट। जो भी चीज़ मैं पढ़ता हूँ वो मुझे लगता है कि मुझे करनी चाहिए, मैं उसको लेके रख लेता हूँ, और जब वो सही वक्त आता है तब वो अपने आप हो जाता है। यही मैं कह सकता हूँ। जो आइंस्टाइन, जो मैंने सबसे रिसेंट नाटक किया है, वो कोई 10 साल से वो स्क्रिप्ट मेरे ड्रॉअर में पड़ी थी, मेरे बिस्तर के पास, और मैं सोचता था कि हाँ कि ये करूँगा ज़रूर, पर सही वक्त पे, और पिछले साल सही वक्त आया तो वो कर दिया मैंने। बस इसी तरह होता है। मुझे अट्रैक्ट जो करती है वो अगला प्रोजेक्ट।
Okay, certainly the last question.
So recently you have mentioned the shift of the actors from theatre to the movie. So what do you think of it? Is it good or bad? Is it affecting the theatre life or?
It is, see what, it's not affecting the theatre. Theatre जितना होना चाहिए था उतना ही हो रहा है, किसी की कमी हमें महसूस नहीं होती। लेकिन what I can't understand is कि इतने लोग जिन्होंने इतने साल तक थिएटर किया है और जो कहते हैं कि उन्हें थिएटर से इतना लगाव है, वो थिएटर छोड़ कैसे सकते हैं? That is something I can't understand. इतने सारे हैं। NSD के ही मेरे ख्याल से कुछ 500 स्टूडेंट होंगे मुंबई में, ग्रेजुएट्स, जिनमें से मुश्किल से 5 हैं जो थिएटर कर रहे हैं। बाकियों को टाइम नहीं मिलता। पार्टी में जाने का टाइम मिल जाता है, छुट्टियां लेने का टाइम मिल जाता है, गपशप करने का टाइम मिल जाता है, थिएटर करने का टाइम नहीं मिलता। तो इससे तो यही जाहिर होता है कि उन्हें सच्चा लगाव था ही नहीं थिएटर से, और थिएटर उनके लिए सिर्फ एक जरिया था। एंड आई डोंट क्रिटिसाइज देम फॉर दैट। ठीक है भैया, आपकी मर्जी। मैं ये नहीं कह रहा कि आप क्यों नहीं करते हो, नहीं कर रहे, मत करो। जिसकी मर्जी हो वो कर रहा है, और जितने लोग कर रहे हैं वो काफ़ी है। और ज़्यादा होते तो और ज़्यादा अच्छा होता, लेकिन नहीं है तो नहीं है।
So on behalf of all of us here, a very warm thank you to Naseer ji.
Yes, yes. I think in India now they're becoming hugely popular because they're seen as an alternative to it. So, really looking for some kind of
Those men and I play tennis together.
Yeah. So he's in our group. So.
Shift. And I actually watched Tridev when it released.
I believe that there was no time. That's easier for you. Sorry.
It's a
Did he get the